Hey, everybody, welcome back. It is the Razzball Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I am Beaton, joined by the one, the only, Gray, all right, the Fantasy Master Lothario. How you doing, Gray? Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thanks, man. I'm wearing green panties. Do you speaking of panties now? I don't know. So this this podcast of starters is completely off the rails already.
Are we talking about Robbie Ray? Is that where this discussion's going, or what?
Yeah. So I was in New York drafting for Tout Wars, and I was drafting starting pitching by whose panty line I could see the best, and I went with Robbie Ray first. That's actually that is true. That is not a exaggeration. It's I think by the time people listen to this, the first games of the season that no one in the U.S. will be watching will have already taken place. Well, I won't be watching on the West Coast. Maybe some people on the East Coast might be watching.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna have baseball, Gray. It's gonna be my Cubbies versus the Dodgers. We're gonna get a couple of games here to start the season off. I mean, I'm pretty excited just to have some baseball. I don't know if I'm going to wake up that early. I'll probably just record the game and watch it back later. That sounds much more enjoyable than trying to wake up really, really early. But I mean, we got baseball. Set your lineups if you've already drafted. If you haven't drafted, you can always backfill potentially and load up on players in this draft if that's how your league's gonna approach this one. But we are back in baseball season, Gray.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, even if games weren't happening, the way to really tell is if you breathe in, you smell it. That's Royce Lewis's first injury. So yeah, we're back, baby.
I thought you were just going to talk about the pollen count here in Atlanta already because it's already starting to climb. That's always really fun season for me. But yeah, let's jump into pitching, Gray. We've done the positional preview, and so this is the first time we're getting into something other than batters. Obviously, how do you, for those who don't listen to us and have never heard us talk about pitching before, how do you draft and view pitching? Does it change in different leagues, like deeper leagues or shallower leagues? In general, how many starting pitchers out of, the top, we're going to cover 40 here today. So how many out of your top 40 are you generally trying to get, or maybe out of your top 100 or 200 picks, whatever it is? And then just generally for this year, does it feel like there's more variances in pitching ADP than normal? Because I feel like in the previous few years, like 1 through 20 was pretty set. There might be some people moved around, but like those were the same people. And even that feels off this year. And then after 20, it gets, I mean, you can go any number of directions.
I've been saying this for quite a few years now, where I don't really, in snake drafts, I don't draft a starting pitcher until around maybe like 45 overall in a snake draft. So, and that's usually roughly 22 to $25 maybe, in that range for auction drafts. It varies. It depends on the number of teams in a league, obviously. But like a 12-team mixed league, I usually won't even go over $20 for a starting pitcher. But yeah, in a snake draft, usually around 45 overall is when I draft my first starter. I think I'm not that alone in that anymore. I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing things that aren't there. I mean, that's possible. There's definitely a possibility that I'm starting to go crazy. I mean, that is for sure a possibility. But I do think that more people are waiting to draft their first starter now than before. It feels like, because like usually, like when I say I'm drafting my first starter at like 45 overall, that is usually around the 8th starter. It depends on the league. Let's say that's 12 team mixed league, 12 to 14 team, maybe 15 team, but it's usually there's a good like 7 or 8 starters off the board by pick 45. This year it doesn't feel like that. It feels like if I want like a decent starter, like not decent, I mean, I think there's a bunch of decent starters, but if I want like a top 5 starter this year, there's a chance I could possibly get that at like pick 40 to 45. Like if I just like reach a little bit, it depends on the draft pick too. Like if you're picking at, pick if you have the first pick overall versus the 12th pick in a 12 team mixed league, that varies as to where you're taking your first starter, which round and everything. So, but it feels like there's a lot more starters on the board. Like I could have sworn in the previous years I would be like, I'm avoiding this 7 or 8 starters to begin a draft. And this year, there's only 3 starters that I'm really avoiding in the beginning. And it's not even about me not liking them. It's about them just going too high. So there's only 3 starters that are going too high for me in most leagues. Now, again, it varies depending on the league, but the 4th starter off the board is a possibility for me, and I'm not drafting until pick 45. That feels different than past years. So that means a lot less people are drafting starters crazy early. Now, there's, again, it depends on the league. Now there's, like the main event, the NFBC leagues, those leagues pitching it tends to get pushed up, and you have pitchers going like you have like 12 pitchers going in the first 2 rounds. Like, that's more because there's an overall prize and people are, are going after that. I don't think that necessarily means that that's better than, waiting on pitching in a 12 to 15 team league. If it's, a friends and family league, or just, any league really other than the main event leagues. Like for whatever reason, the main event leagues, they really drive up the pitching. But I don't think there's a ton of those people listening to this podcast. But anyway, I think there's a lot less pitching going early. And I think that's also like, that's across, even in deeper leagues, because like I just got back from New York, like I mentioned, with Robbie Ray's Panty Lines. And I just got back from New York, and starting pitching was pretty affordable. Now that was an auction draft, so not a snake draft, but guys were going in that draft for like, less than like top pitchers were going for less than I feel like they used to go for. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like Paul Skeens going for like $32 is like as the top pitcher in an NL only. That feels less than like a couple years ago when like the top pitcher would go for like $37 to $40 or something. Like it feels like people have really backed off of like top starting pitching. So I don't know. I guess I'll take credit for it.
Yeah, I mean, you can take credit for it. Maybe it was the fact that, we've seen top pitchers fall off a little bit more often recently. There's any number of reasons, Gray. But yes, I think, you and myself, we're obviously the ones who drove this trend and should get all the credit for it. That being said, this year, I've actually gotten some top starting pitchers where you were usually like, you and I, we just ignore the top 5 because we're priced out. I've managed to randomly get them just because they'll fall to that 45 range that you're talking about. And then there's other drafts where I won't draft a pitcher until we get to past pick 100 because there's just so many pitchers still sitting around and everybody's still drafting hitters. So it feels like counterproductive to be the one to start the pitching run when I never wanted to start it to begin with.
Right. Yeah, no, completely. Yeah, no, this year already, I still have some drafts left, but this year I've drafted Dylan Cease and Cole Reagans. And those guys, I'm going. This is more anecdotal. Like I don't know what they would have gone in previous years if they were coming off of the years they just had. But I really think Dylan Cease and Cole Reagans, if they were coming off of those 2024 seasons in a different year, I feel like they would have been going in the top 30, top 25 even in drafts. And instead, it's like I can draft Dylan Cease or Cole Reagans, whereas like I was never able to draft like the fifth starter off the board. Like that's crazy. Like I shouldn't, like, if I'm waiting until pick 45, I shouldn't be able to get the fifth starter off the board in most years. I don't know. I feel like there was an overcorrection towards like what we do, which is wait on starters. It feels like there was a bit of an overcorrection this year, and maybe that'll work itself back. I don't know. I mean, I do get it in some respects because starting pitching is really difficult on the arm, leads to a lot of injuries. So, and then there's also like innings have been hit across the board for all, like the top starters barely last to 200 innings now. Like very, very few guys past 200 innings. So it's like innings are down. More teams are going to 6-man rotations. It's and the injuries. So it's just like one thing compounding another thing, compounding another, that is like causing pitching to get suppressed in drafts. And I mean, I agree. I have been the one who's been saying this for years. So, I'm not going to disagree with that. But I do think people have finally caught up to it. And yeah, it's actually made it fun for me because I haven't been like, I'm ignoring all these great starters, because in years past, I'd be like, I would always say like, I like this starter, I'm just not drafting him. But this year it's like, I like Dylan Cease and I'm able to draft him. Great. This sounds wonderful to me.
Yeah, it does. It sounds really nice to both of us to randomly be able to draft top pitchers because of the change. And I mean, it's pretty different for us, Gray. But like we said, it's nice to see kind of hitters take over. And then there's always the whole starting pitchers are only going to contribute in 4 categories, especially when we're talking about top hitters. They're going to be 5 or they're going to be really strong in 4. So it really never made sense for them to be going like top 3, top 5 type of picks. I think even top 20, you and I probably don't really have pitchers in that area. Let's get in the rankings, Gray. Number one.
That actually, real briefly though, on what you're saying, that was always why I was like, when a starting pitcher would go in like the top 15 overall, and it would be like, oh, you're between like Paul Skeens and Corbin Carroll. It's like, yeah, but Corbin Carroll's giving you 5 categories, and Paul Skeens hopefully is giving you 4, but you can't even account for wins. So it's like, so it still doesn't make sense when people are taking the top starters in like, in the range of where guys are going who have 5 category potential. When you get to like, the starters where we're taking a guy at like, 45 overall, then it's like between, like Teoscar Hernandez or Dylan Cease. It's like, well, Teoscar is a kind of a 4 category guy. Dylan Cease is a 4 category guy. I mean, then it actually feels analogous, and it's like, okay, that makes sense to me. But it never made sense, and it still doesn't when people are like, well, I'm between Paul Skeens and like, a Jackson Churio or something. Like, you're crazy, man. Go with the bat. You're like, stop, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there's also some of the overcorrect that happened from 2019 and 2021. Like, I know after 2019, I valued pitching higher because there was only like 4 of them that weren't terrible, because 2019 was ridiculous. So you're like, well, I got to grab one of the 5 arms that's actually going to be decent. Otherwise, what am I going to do?
Yeah, I was actually in New York. I was in New York this past weekend, and I was walking to Greenwich Village to meet up with some friends. And I had this epiphany where it was like, I was thinking about like 2019 was such a bizarre year with the bouncy ball. And it was like, how do we account for that bouncy ball? And then we went right into 2020. So by 2021, it was like we had no sort of sample to really, grasp onto. To like, I feel like now finally we have a bit of like stability to know exactly what we're headed towards. Like now, when you say that, then Rob Manfred throws out like a bouncy ball and everything changes, or the ball's dead, and you don't know that for sure yet. But it does feel like now that we've had 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, just like back to back to back, and going into this season, it feels like we have some stability about like where we're headed, versus like for a while there, it was like, are we getting the bouncy ball? Are we getting a full season? Is the strike happening? What's going on? So anyway, that was deep thoughts with Gray Albright.
Yeah, Gray. So I guess before, I really wanted to get in the players, but now I have to comment on that. So I was doing some research, and I noticed actually odd years. I know that's just so random. The odd years have been all the bouncy balls, and we've actually had, if you go back and you split the years up from 2016 to now, every odd year is in the top 5 of home runs, and every even year is in the bottom. So I wouldn't actually be surprised if we get a bouncy ball this year.
Let's go. Ellie De La Cruz going 50-50. Let's do it, baby.
I really wouldn't be surprised if it happens. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But it has been a decade since we got an odd year that wasn't a bouncy ball year. So we will see, which means maybe some of these pitchers might actually be important. Who knows? Let's get into it, Gray. Number 1, you had Paul Skeens. We talked about him already in the top 20 show, even though neither of us are going to draft him in the top 20. Number 2, Tariq Skubal. He is actually my number 1, but last year he had 192 innings pitched, 18-4 record, 2.39, 0.92, 228 Ks, 30.3% K rate, 4.6% walk rate. You have him projected for 202 innings, 17.5 record, 2.51 ERA, 0.94 whip, and 237 Ks. Seemed prime for the breakout. And sometimes what seems like it's due is exactly what we get, Gray.
Yeah.
I mean, he's great. I think the only concern that I might have is just Detroit team itself isn't very good. So, 18-4 was really nice last year. I don't know if I can expect that to repeat.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know. If you were to say like he goes 20, if he wins 20 games and he only loses 2 or 3, that wouldn't shock me either. Like he's so good. Like I'm not gonna, like I've said already. Now we talked, at length about how I'm not drafting a top starter, and this is one of the guys I'm not drafting, but I have no complaints about him really. I went Skeens over him, just simply because the youth of Skeens, I feel like there's I'm going for a little bit fresher arm, and I think Skubal's had a few more innings, so that's a little bit of a worry, but not really. I would absolutely, if I were to type to draft a top starter, I would be fine with drafting Skubal. I believe in the Razzball. Oh no, I changed it last minute. Okay, so I did have Skubal as the my AL Cy Young pick. I ended up changing it. I'll tell you who it was when we get to him, but I did have Skubal at first. So if I think he can win the Cy Young, I obviously think he's very good. So I don't have any issues with Skubal.
Yeah, I mean, we're splitting hairs. I think on the top 3 in general, you can kind of split them out however you want. I like Skubal just because we've seen him throw the innings. I understand that also means that he has the innings on his arm. So you can kind of look at that either way. Number 3, Zach Wheeler, 200 innings pitched last year, 16-7 record, 2.57 ERA, 0.96 whip, 224 strikeouts, which led to a 28.5% K rate. He had a 6.6% walk rate. You have him down for a 16-7 record, 2.59 ERA, 0.98 WHIP, 221 strikeouts, and 198 innings. He's the velocity was down slightly from 95.9 to 95.447. A half mile an hour isn't the biggest deal, but he is starting to get a little bit older. As long as he's over 95, I don't really see it as being an issue. But it does feel weird that the 35-year-old is the one we might say is the safest of the group.
Yeah. No, I think Skubal and Wheeler, Skeens, Skubal and Wheeler are my three guys that I'm avoiding just because they're going too high. But again, I don't really have a problem with Zach Wheeler. I just think he's a little bit overpriced for the fact that it's a pitcher versus a hitter. But I don't really hate him. I do see your complaints with the the velocity down a little. He's 35 years old. There's a bunch of innings on his arm. If that's enough for people to take a hitter in the third round and or late second, wherever he's going, and then take a starting pitcher the next round, go for it, because that's what I would do. I wouldn't take Zach Wheeler, but I don't really have a problem with him. I feel like with past years, what I did a little bit differently this year with my starter rankings, that I don't even know if I mentioned this in the rankings, but previous years, I would go closer to ADP and tell people to avoid a guy like a Chris Sale or a DeGrom, for instance. I would have put them in, I would have ranked them in my top 5, but I would have told people to avoid them. This year, I ranked them much later because I really would not draft them. So I decided, if I'm not going to draft them, I'm not going to rank them somewhere and tell people not to draft them. That's kind of silly, even though that's what I'm kind of doing with Zach Wheeler. But I do have them in the overall. I do have Skubal and Wheeler after their ADP. So there's really no way you're drafting them if you follow my rankings. And Chris Sale and DeGrom, I was like, I felt like they were such avoids for me that I was thinking about ranking them where they're going with their ADP, because they are going higher than where I have them ranked. But at the end of the day, I was like, nah, I'm just going to rank them where I actually would draft them, even though they'll never be in drafts at that point. They'll always be drafted before that. So, I don't know. Anyway, it's just my thought process behind the starter rankings, and how Chris Sale is probably going in drafts around this point, but I don't have him at this point at all. I'm very out on Chris Sale. I guess we'll get to him when we get to him, though. All right, we can move along.
Yep, we'll move along. And I guess for the record, when I do my rankings, I've pretty much always gone with what you say is, I'll rank guys where I'm willing to draft them. So when people look at my rankings, usually the things that stand out are, oh, you have player X buried in your rankings. That's hilarious. It's like, no, it's not hilarious. That's where I would actually draft Bo Bichette or Jacob DeGrom.
Oh my God. Speaking of which, I don't want to derail this podcast, but we have writers for Razzball who are actually putting in as their bounce back Bo Bichette. What are we going to do?
Yet?
What are we going to do? They've gotten their walking papers.
You fired them? That would be my general reaction to that. I mean, you leaked Bo Bichette's bouncing back. You're fired. Get out. We don't need you here. Like,
get out of this virtual office.
We'll find some other people to write for us free. Okay, we'll find some other people. Let's move on, Gray. Next tier here. I had to double check, make sure I was right. I looked at your article like 6 times. We have a 1-person tier, which may be the first time I can ever remember seeing that outside of maybe like the top player at the position, Gray.
I know.
Logan Gilbert sits in this tier by himself. Last year, he had 208 and 2/3 innings, 9-12 record, 3.23, 0.89, 220 strikeouts, 27.4% strikeout, 4.6% walk rate. You have him down for a 13-12 record, 2.89 ERA, 0.96 WHIP, 217 strikeouts, and 204 innings. He had a career best strikeout and walk rate. He did struggle in the second half some. 2.79 ERA in the first versus a 4.01 in the second. But the whip really wasn't much different. The K and walk rate were actually better in the second half. So it really seems like the BABIP and left on base were just a little bit lucky there. The velocity was a little low at the beginning of the season when he started 95, but into the season over 97. So I feel like that's fine. He showed up at spring throwing 97. So I kind of pushing those worries aside. But I think Logan Gilbert is kind of, the last year's kind of showing of, you can be a really good pitcher and still come out with a losing record. Wins are not guaranteed, Gray, because Logan Gilbert had a phenomenal season and went 9-12 for a playoff-bound team.
Yeah, I know. I think Logan Gilbert is, well, this is my first tier and also the first pitcher where I feel like I legitimately could draft him, and I want to draft him. I also had George Kirby in this tier, but he's got shoulder soreness, so that's why Logan Gilbert's by himself. It's a weird tier this year, but that goes back to what I was saying originally in this podcast. It's just a weird year where, like, I used to have more starters in the front that I would be like, he's great, but I'm avoiding him. But there's a lot fewer starters right now that I feel like are great and are going in the top 30. So Logan Gilbert is, he's the one guy that is that feels like he's draftable by me, or if you follow what I say with drafting around like in the fourth round, in back into third, beginning of the fourth, depending on the size of the league. But yeah, Logan Gilbert also, if he would have had wins of if he would have the same amount of wins as Zach Wheeler last year on the player rater, they would have been basically the exact same pitcher, Logan Gilbert and Zach Wheeler on the player rater, if and Chris Sale. So Logan Gilbert basically was the second best. He could have been the second best pitcher last year if he would have just had more wins. And that's so, like you said, that's so fluky. Like, he's essentially the same team. I think the hitting's probably a tad worse this year for the Mariners, but more or less the same. But that doesn't mean Logan Gilbert can't go out and win 15 to 17 games this year. Look at Tariq Skubal, won 18 on the Tigers, who also, had that great second half, but still, they're not a great team. They weren't a great team for offense. So yeah, Logan Gilbert could easily would be like the first, second, or third, or top two pitcher this year. He could be. It's just like that's where the stuff grades out at. Like, he has, at the end of the day, like, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but I know I've mentioned in past years. But really, like, if you were to lose your starting pitching rankings, like going into your draft, and you were like, panicked and like, oh no, what do I do? And then, like, rather than sobbing, you could just open up Fangraphs or Baseball Reference or any site that has last year's K- walks. And if you
Razzball.com.
or Razzball.com. If you were to just, I guess if you lost your starting rankings, you could just open up Razzball.com and look at the starting rankings. But if you were to lose all rankings and you could only look at like one stat, like if you just looked at strikeouts minus walks, and that could be your starting pitching rankings. And Logan Gilbert's like one of the best when it comes to strikeouts minus walks. And there's no reason to think he won't be one of the best again this year. Like, nothing in his stat line looks fluky or anything. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about strikeouts minus walks. that's really, I mean, there's a lot more. Obviously, there's like, how a guy manages to get strikeouts or manages to command his pitches and how repeatable his delivery is and like his health. And there's all kinds of little things that go into starting pitching rankings. But at the end of the day, Ks minus walks. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do worse than just using K to walk ratios. I mean, it's pretty solid. You'd come up with a couple weird names, but yeah, absolutely. Moving on, Gray. I actually thought Logan Gilbert you would just slide up into the top tier since, again, like the numbers were on par with those guys. The stuff is on par with those guys. I mean, Logan Gilbert's great, and if you can get him around later than the top three are going, all the power to you. Next up, new tier here, number 5, Dylan Cease. Last year had 189 innings, 14-11 record, 3.47 ERA, 107 WHIP, 224 strikeouts, 29.4% K, 8.5% walk. You have him down for a 15-7 record, 3.39, 109 and 233 strikeouts and 193 innings. Kind of the opposite of Gilbert in regards to the halves. He had a better second half with a 2.66 ERA than his 3.99 ERA in the first. Again, WHIP pretty much in line. It was a lot of BABIP related. The K rate, walk rate were better in the first half. Again, a lot of things lining up here, just kind of opposite halves here between Gilbert and Cease. Just maybe too many fly balls in the first half, and seems like if anything, velocity may be up this spring training, and supposedly working on a sinker. So Dylan Cease is an interesting pitcher. He's missed some time here and there, but when he's pitching great, he has been phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a pitching coach, but or in the front office of any major league teams, but I do wonder why they don't teach the sinker to literally every pitcher, because if you look at like batting average against when it comes to sinkers league wide, it's like nasty. I mean, it's not surprising because if it's I guess it's not a pitch that everyone can throw, but if people can throw it, hitters really struggle against it. Anyway, that's an interesting little tidbit about Dylan Cease's tinkering with a sinker. That's or he's sinkering. He's sinkering. I think with Dylan Cease, he's like one of those guys where like I look at for whatever reason, he really upsets my apple cart when it comes to my whip on the War Room. I don't know why, but projections really don't like Dylan Cease's whip for whatever reason, even though like last year 1.07 throw out 23. The year before in 2022 it was 111 whip. And everyone is projecting him for like a 119 whip. And it's like 119. Why is he getting so bad? he's like in the middle of his career. Like he's in the prime of his career. And he just had one of his best seasons. Actually, now that I look at his career, he's not very
pretty high at times.
He's not very good in odd years. I hope that's not a sign of things to come.
Oh, those bouncy balls, Gray. Those bouncy balls in odd years.
Man, that actually now I'm really concerned. No, I'm not concerned. Because like he can throw a 10.7 to 10 or actually even 11 plus K per 9 with if he has like a 3.3 walk rate with with those kind of K rates that I just mentioned, there's nothing stopping Dylan Cease from being an ace other than like some bad luck with homers allowed, like you mentioned. I mean, the fly balls, if they're up, it could be a little bit of a concern if they're up at the wrong moments. Like, if there's guys on base and he gives up home runs versus giving up solo shots. So, I mean, it's like all the ratios are so fluky, but, at the end of the day, Dylan Cease is a 220 strikeout guy that's on a team that could give him anywhere from like 13 to 17 wins, and the rest, and he throws a lot of innings every year. I mean, he's been really healthy, knock on wood, but 2 of the last 3 years, 180 plus innings, 3 of the last 3 years, 175 plus innings every year. So yeah, I mean, as long as he does what he's done, minus some bad luck in like 23, I'll take that. I'll take that all day at like the 5th starter off the board. If the worst case scenario is you get Dylan Cease with 225 Ks and 15 wins, and you have to draft a Michael Wacha later to help out your ratios or something. It's like, that's fine. I can make that work.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I actually have Dylan Cease right here too. Hopefully he'll avoid the odd number year curse that he's had, but yeah, I'm not concerned. He's still a great pitcher. But what you have to remember is when his numbers go up, the whole league's numbers are going up with these balls. So it's not as bad as it seems when you're looking at the change in numbers. It's more a credit to the people who don't really change even when the ball changes, honestly. Up next is number 6, Cole Reagans. Last year, he had 186 innings, 11-9 record, 3.14 ERA, 1.14 WHIP, 223 strikeouts, which was a 29.3% K rate. He had an 8.8% walk rate. You have him down for 14-8 record, 3.36 ERA, 1.13 WHIP, 226 strikeouts, and 188 innings. He's also working on a sinker or a two-seamer as well, Gray. So that could be really fun to add to his arsenal. He had a 290 BABIP and a 74.7 left on base. Those are pretty, high end for a pitcher with his stuff. So there may actually be a little bit of room for improvement even here with Reagans, just based off of luck, not even just skill development.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. Totally. I agree. I was just looking at his spring training. As of this recording, he has a 5.79 ERA, and that means nothing at all. But I was just curious to see what his spring training ERA was last year, and it was 6.75. So again, it means nothing. I was out on Cole Reagans last year because I was worried about the command. And as I say in the starter rankings, I'm happy to take the L on the Cole Reagans miss last year, because I feel like my process was right. Like there's like if you were all in at his price last year, it wasn't good process, because like he had bad command, and he had never thrown over 100 innings. So it was like there was a lot of risk involved. So I'm happy taking that L. I honestly, I don't even think it's that much of an L, because I was like, I was out on him and I was fine with it. And what he ended up doing, it's all good. This year I'm 100% in. Like I've seen it now. I've seen him produce the results I want to see from a starting pitcher who I take around like 45, 50 overall. So I'm totally happy with Cole Reagans. I'm in 100%. He's another starter who, like you mentioned, the BABIP and left on base being on the high side. Also, he only had 11 wins. So I mean, again, it's like if the Tigers can give Skubal 18 wins, Cole Reagans can get 18 wins. It's just, Cole Reagans threw 187 innings, 186 and a third innings last year. If he throws 185 innings again this year, he could easily top 15 wins. So, 15 wins, great ratios, great strikeouts. I'm kind of surprised I'm able to draft him, to be honest. Like he feels like a starter who in past years people would have been pushing up into the top 30, but for whatever reason, they're not doing it. And I've already drafted Cole Reagans, I think in 2 different leagues I've drafted Cole Reagan. So I'm happy to do it. I saw it last year and I'm willing to get in like 100%. So let's go.
Yeah, I loved him last year. I love him this year. Let's go. Cole Reagans is awesome. Number 7, Framber Valdez. Last year had 176 innings, 15-7 record, 2.91 ERA, 1.11 WHIP, 169 strikeouts, which was a 24% K rate, and had a 7.8% walk rate. You have him down for 14-9 record, 3.39 ERA, 1.12 WHIP, 191 strikeouts, and 194 innings. Bad May, but other than that, he was pretty good. Still, very heavy ground ball pitcher. And it feels like nobody wants him in the draft room, Gray. So, I mean, I'm fine scooping him up if he continues to fall down draft rooms because people are prioritizing the upside.
Yeah. Yeah, it is weird, right? I feel the same way. Like Framber Valdez, like is getting drafted like in leagues where you're almost like looking at like breaking news to be like, hey, is something wrong here? Like, am I missing something? Because he should be going like fast and like people should be excited about drafting him as their number 1 pitcher. But for whatever reason, drafting feels very flat for Framber Valdez so far. It's nearing the end of draft season. So yeah, it doesn't feel like it's going to pick up either. So yeah, he is a guy who is very available in drafts. He's going after a bunch of starters who we have not even mentioned yet in my starting rankings. I'm happy to take him. I think, when you're looking at right now, another thing I haven't really talked about yet on this podcast is like with the pitch clock, more so than ever, you really want starting pitching that is going to be able to have good command. And he's not exactly elite like the Logan Gilberts of the world, but he's at a 3 or under walk per 9 for the last 3 years, and his strikeouts, they're on the border of like a 9 K per 9. So that's an ace basically. If you're looking at a guy who's like a 2.8 walk per 9 and a 9 K per 9, that's a number 1. If he can throw 180 plus innings, which again, Framber Valdez is just remarkably resilient when it comes to innings and throwing a ton of them. So you should be in a place where a good place to get wins, hopefully, anywhere from like 13 to 17 wins, a low 3, high 2 ERA year after year. I mean, he has a 3.3 ERA in over 880 innings in his career. That's an ace, like ratios, WHIP and ERA are 2 categories in your league. So, it's like, I get it that he may not have the, the 225 plus strikeouts. Like you may not get that, but you're not getting that from a lot of guys. And he gives you everything else. So yeah, I like Framber Valdez a lot as a number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're a little higher on him than I have him. I think I'm a little closer to ADP, but still, like he's a great pitcher, and if he happens to slide for whatever reason, absolutely grab him up. Number 8, Blake Snell, 104 innings pitched, 5-3 record, 3.12, 105, 145 strikeouts, which led to a 34.7 K rate, 10.5% walk rate. He had 11.5 record, or you have projected for an 11.5 record, 3.34 ERA, 1.11 WHIP, 166 strikeouts and 124 innings. Threw the slider a little less last year. That was really the only big difference in pitch mix. Did have a thigh abductor issue to start the season and then a groin issue midseason. Finished strong. I feel like you always hate Blake Snell, so this feels really weird for me to see him this high for you, Gray.
Yeah, no, I have. I've hated Blake Snell for probably his whole career. But at the end of the day, like I look at his numbers and I'm like, if you're taking every starting pitcher and expecting none of them really to throw a lot of innings and no starters are really going to be great for wins because there's not going to be a lot of innings. If you take all that with a grain of salt and you look at Blake Snell's numbers, it's hard to deny what he's done for like his entire career. Again, going to career numbers, he has a 3.19 ERA in almost 1,100 innings in his career, and a 1.22 WHIP. But that was, he had early on in his career, he had high WHIPs. In the last year it was 1.05. His walks were down last year. His strikeouts were up. He's going to be on the Dodgers where, it's going to be like a 12-man rotation between it depends on how much they want Dustin May working as the starting pitching caddy from the bullpen to the mound. There's a lot of guys in that Dodger rotation that it could potentially get in there. But I think Blake Snell, as long as he's healthy, he's going to give you 125 of the best innings you're going to be able to get. And that should lead to, roughly what my projections, like 12 wins and, great ERA, great WHIP, and incredible strikeouts. Like, his strikeouts in 125 innings that I have him for at 166 strikeouts. And in that, it's like basically, it's more or less what you're going to get from like the best starters who are throwing 175 innings, So I'll take the 125 innings from Blake Snell and be pretty happy with it. So yeah, I've come around on Blake Snell. I'm appreciating the starting pitching where you may not get 180 plus innings, because no one's really throwing 180 plus innings anymore, except for the next guy.
Yeah, you finally come around to smell what Blake is cooking. Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at rankings and you're putting these guys up here in the numbers, you're starting to look and you're looking for upside, who can give you the strikeouts, who can also give you ratios, and you get to Blake Snell, and you're like, well, yeah, he's only going to give me 120, 130 innings. But then you start looking at the numbers like, yeah, but he is really good consistently in those innings. So I understand why you have him here. I have him similar spots, maybe just slightly lower. But, I mean, he's great when he pitches. As you mentioned, the Dodgers probably running a 6-man rotation, if not more at some point this year, depending on when people come back and how many people are healthy at any given point. But, yeah, everything kind of lines up for him. I will say in a deeper league where you need the innings, I can see moving him down this just because, replacement level may not be as good for those innings that you're missing. Number 9, Michael King last year had 173 innings, 13-9 record, 2.95 ERA, 1.19 WHIP, 201 strikeouts, which was a 27.7% K rate, 8.7% walk rate. You him down for 12-8 record, 3.38 ERA, 1.16 WHIP, 207 strikeouts, and 181 innings. Failed starter, turned reliever, turned back to starter. The velo was obviously down from when he was a reliever, but not that much. He's still over 94. Numbers look good this spring in regards to velocity as well. I think maybe the only concern here is, with him being a reliever, can he put up innings back-to-back seasons?
Yeah, I think so. Because in the in the grand scheme of things, he hasn't really had that many innings on his arm in his career. So yeah, I would take a guy, like Michael King, who has, maybe the jump in innings from 23 to 24 of, a jump of 70 innings. I'll take that over, maybe a guy who has like 100 and, 70 innings for 4 straight years and has like, is starting to break down or something. Like, King's he's in the middle of his peak. So I think he's fine. I'm not that worried about that. I'm not really worried about Michael King at all. I'm kind of bummed I haven't drafted him yet. It just hasn't really worked out for for where he's going, for and me drafting guys like I mentioned, I took Dylan Cease and Cole Reagans. So at that point, I'm not drafting another starter immediately. So Michael King is he hasn't been. I don't think I've drafted him, but it's and nothing against him though. I would happily take him. I think he's actually got really nice upside from even like what he did last year, which was great. I mean, if you look at, I know these years have reliever year ERAs it's not exactly a straight comparison, but I mean, the last 3 years, his ERAs are 229, 275, and 295. So he hasn't had an ERA over 3 since 2021, and then it was a 355 ERA. So even then, I don't know. I mean, his numbers have been remarkably good. Like when it comes down to like when push comes to shove, and it comes down to the actual categories that matter. And all his and all his other stuff really backs it up. Like you mentioned the velocity, but his strikeouts, he went from reliever to starter, and his strikeouts didn't really dip too terribly. Like, he had a 10.4 K per nine last year, just over 3 walk per nine. His BABIP was pretty neutral for him. It was a 290 BABIP. So it's like, he had a 295 ERA, but there wasn't a ton of luck there. I mean, maybe his homer per 9 was a little bit low, but I don't know if you can really say that, because there's a reason why it was low. I mean, he's he's keeping the ball in the park. So I don't see really any drawbacks for Michael King. I like him a lot. I have no issue drafting him. I would in a second.
Yeah, I like him too. I don't like him as much as you do. I am a little concerned about the innings jump, and then additionally, he's not he's not an elite whip guy. Even as a reliever, he wasn't an elite whip guy. So I really don't expect that to change. And when we're talking about these top guys, you kind of want to get all 4 categories out of them, not like 3.5. So I have him a little bit lower, but he's still great. And the strikeouts, kind of make up for some of the whip disparity of some of the other guys that I might have above him. The next guy, which is Garrett Crochet at number 10, 146 innings last year, 6-12 record, 3.58 ERA, 107 whip, 209 strikeouts, which was a 35% K rate to go with a 5.5% walk rate. You have him down for a 13-9 record, 3.47 ERA, 105 whip, 193 strikeouts, and 154 innings. Four-seamer cutter. He's working on a sinker. I mean, it seems to be the thing this offseason. Everybody's working on some kind of sinker two-seamer. As you mentioned, it's a good thing for people to work on. It was kind of an up and down ride. He had 3 bad months, 2 absolutely elite months, and 1 good solid month. When you look at the bad months, it was pretty walk related, some BABIP related as well. The FIP wasn't nearly as bad as the numbers seem to point out. And the bad numbers also started to come as the White Sox limited his workload. He wasn't allowed to go more than 3-4 innings in a game. All that to say, I really like Garrett Crochet, and I'm making up excuses for his bad months. Did move from the White Sox to Boston, which should help in regards to just being on a competent organization. Boston got a bunch of prospects out of it: Kyle Teal, Brady Montgomery, Chase Meadroth, Wycombe Gonzalez. Really, Boston gave up Teal and maintained their other top prospects. So good for them. But Garrett Crochet, I really like him. I think some people have him kind of like top 5, top 6. I'm not quite that high on him, but I do have him in the top 10. I really like Crochet.
Yeah, I was looking at today. I was thinking, I think I might have ranked Garrett Crochet a little bit too low. I felt I don't know why, but I think I mentioned earlier that I changed Tariq Skubal from my Cy Young pick. I'm going with Garrett Crochet. I wrote him in for my AL Cy Young pick. I think he's on the precipice of being like the best pitcher in baseball. It feels like that. Like he feels like he could have one of those like 1.8 to 2.2 ERA type years where it's just like 180 innings of absolute just filth and have like 275 strikeouts and 16 to 18 wins and just be the easy number 1 starter in baseball. It feels like he could do that. I don't know if he's gonna. I'm just saying, like, he's capable of it. He's capable of being, as good as Paul Skeens was last year, or as good as Paul Skeens will be this year. I think Crochet is capable of that. So I really like him. I wish I would have drafted him. I haven't yet. Maybe in my last like 2 remaining drafts, I'll make up for that. But I was researching some guys, looking at guys for this podcast, and Garrett Crochet, I was seeing like how filthy he's been in spring training, and I sort of was like, you know what, he's got that stuff where he could be the best pitcher in baseball. So I'd like to acquire that. I like that. I like having the best pitcher in baseball. I think he could do it. As far as the drawbacks, there's some. I mean, you mentioned the BABIP being high. He's now going to Fenway, which has like the worst BABIP, the Rock Coors has the worst BABIP, but Fenway's up there with really bad BABIP. Yeah. So there's a chance that Crochet could get singled to death and have like a ERA explosion and be like really good for strikeouts, but not good in general for like ratios. That could happen. I mean, it could. So I don't want to say he's a lock to be the best pitcher in baseball, but I do think that possibility is very strong with him as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. He was more ground ball than fly ball last year, but that could potentially change. Yeah, I mean, I really like Garrett Crochet. We've talked enough about it. Happy to have him. I got him on the Memorial Magazine League. I got him while I was price enforcing for $21, but for $21, I will absolutely take Garrett Crochet.
What's the depth on the league?
It was a 12-team mixed league, so
that's a good price for him. Yeah.
I think I had him at like 25, so I got him at a discount. The only drawback was I think Cole Reagans went like a few nominations later for the same price, and I do have, as we both do, Reagans higher. But that being said, Garrett Crochet might end up being the best of the group. He has that talent. Number 11, Shota Imanaga. Last year, had 173 innings, 15-3 record, 2.91 ERA, 102 WHIP, 174 strikeouts, 25.1% K rate, 4% walk rate. You have him down for a 13-6 record, 3.17 ERA, 105 WHIP, 177 strikeouts, and 175 innings. Four seam, splitter, slider, sinker. He's been working on the slider in spring training and in the offseason, so we could see that potentially more. Can he repeat what he did? Is there still room for improvement, or what are your thoughts on Shota?
I think with Shota, he's like a guy who I was looking at on the player rater for last year. He was the fifth best starter last year, and I have him ranked as the 11th best starter. And I moved him up as I think I have him higher than most people, and I moved him up as as high as I felt like I could. There was it was hard for me to get him above any of the guys that I have ranked above him, but I mean, he's I mean, like I said, I mean, he was the fifth best starter last year. It's hard to see why he can't repeat. Like there's nothing really jumping out at me to be like, oh yeah, this is a little bit fluky, or this was for he had some luck here or something. It's like not really. If anything, I think he was a tad unlucky with like homers per nine. At the end of the day, he strikes out a bunch of guys and he walks no one. Like that's the key for success right there. So I would happily draft him as my first starter. I think there's for ADP wise, I think he's actually going at a point where people are getting him for their second starter even. I don't know. It depends on the league, obviously. So it's league dependent, but Shota is going at like 81 overall on NFBC. That's really late. Like that's number 2 starter territory, and I think he's a number 1.
I really like Shota. I'm really happy the Cubs have him. That being said, I don't actually have him as a number 1 for our game. Just the K rate's a little low. I don't expect the record to carry over. 15-3 is a sparkling record. That's going to be very hard to duplicate, which, he's a great pitcher. He's going to give you good whip. Like the whip is the one thing I'm like pretty sure is going to be rock solid for you. ERA could go up a little bit, just some luck here or there. Wins were definitely pushing in last year in Wrigley. Those are just kind of the concerns I have. I think it's kind of in the same realm as like Justin Steele. I think they're very similar pitchers, and I don't really understand the gap between their draft position, because I really think obviously Justin Steele didn't throw a full complement of innings, but like their numbers are scarily similar. And it just kind of comes down to record. Like Steele was so high on the player rater the year before because he went 16-5. It's amazing what 15 plus wins and 5 or less losses will do to you on the player rater.
I was on Fangraphs looking up Steele's numbers so I could look at it while you were talking, and one of the suggestions was Steel Arm Tyler from the 1800s. I like how people in the 1800s have nicknames where you're like not sure if it's a nickname because like when he was growing up, kids used to call him that, or if it's like because he actually had a steel arm.
Because he had a steel arm.
It's like Measles McGee. It's like, well, is it because he had like freckles, or did he actually have measles? I'll say with Steele, real quick, because he had like elbow soreness in September, I think is why people are a little bit down on Justin Steele. Like, I think he's fine, but I think there is an element of like people are a little bit worried that he didn't throw a full year last year and he also had elbow soreness. So, I don't know. I mean, that's possibly why people are a little bit down on Justin Steele.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Like I said, there's a big group of pitchers that can kind of be moved around in a lot of different orders.
There is so many pitchers. At the end of the day, if you take nothing else away from this podcast, there's a lot of pitchers to draft, and you only need like 6. Like that's the difference between like drafting like a second baseman or a starting pitcher. It's like you need like 1 second baseman. But in the pitching you need like, you need 1 second baseman, but there's like only 8 to choose from total. There's like only 8 good ones, maybe 12. But there's starting pitching, you need 6, but there's like 110 of them to choose from. There's like so many starting pitchers. There's so many on each team. Like, we're gonna get, when we get to the season, they'll be like, oh, Griffin Canning looks good on the Mets. You should go pick him up. And it's like, oh yeah, he was drafted at like 600 overall. Like, there's so many starting pitchers.
There really are. There are so many of them, and there's going to be more that come up that we didn't even think about. Honestly, Gray.
Right.
I mean, people like Garrett Crochet this time last year. Nobody was drafting him in the top 10 pitchers.
No.
Moving on, number 12, Bryce Miller. We have to pick it up, Gray. We got like an hour to cover 30 pitchers here. 180 innings last year, 12-8 record, 2.94 ERA, 0.98 WHIP, 24.3% K rate, 6.4% walk rate. You project for 11-10 record, 3.26 ERA, 101 WHIP, 171 strikeouts, and 184 innings. Struggled in May and June. Finished the rest of the season amazing. I mean, I love Bryce Miller. I have him above ADP, as do you. You have him actually higher than I have, which I didn't think was actually possible.
Yeah, no, I do. I love Bryce Miller, man. I think I think some people, I don't know, maybe some people are just overrating strikeouts. I feel like the thing right now is to really look at strikeouts minus walks, like I mentioned earlier, but really look at command. Like, just look at, like, if a guy's got like pinpoint command, that's all. Like, the rest you can figure out the rest pretty easily. Bryce Miller, man, is like, he's so good for command. He had a under 3 ERA last year in 180 innings. Like, what? That's, that could easily be a top 5 starter. The fact that I have him at 12, like, I struggled to not put him higher. Like, I did not. It was not hard for me to put Bryce Miller where I did. I really like him. Great command, solid strikeouts. Just, pick up if you're really worried about strikeouts. Like, grab Brian Abreu, a bullpen arm from the Astros or something. Just grab a reliever if you're worried about strikeouts. So yeah, I love Bryce Miller.
Yeah, and he did have a 27% strikeout rate in the second half. So even if you're worried about strikeouts, I mean, Bryce Miller's not like, you're not taking a hit here. Like, at worst, he's a 24% guy, which he was last year. And there's upside for 27%, and even potentially better, as he's still very young. So, I really don't understand why Bryce Miller isn't drafted higher. I love him this year. So, absolutely with you on that one. Number 13, Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Last year had 90 innings pitched, 7-2 record, 3 ERA, 1.11 WHIP, 105 strikeouts, 28.5% K rate, 6% walk rate. You have him down for an 11.5 record, 3.19 ERA, 109 WHIP, 159 strikeouts, and 139 innings pitched. He had a triceps issue that cost him a couple months last year. I mean, he was really good when he was pitching, Gray, and I still really like grabbing him in drafts this year. I know maybe some innings concerns, but again, that seems very just kind of random, because any pitcher you could say there's innings concerns over.
Yeah, no, completely. I think he's, again, it's like he's a possibility for the best pitcher in baseball. It'll come down to innings, really, at the end of the day. Like we mentioned with Blake Snell, the Dodgers are going to be going with a ton of starters. They're going to be resting guys. They're going to be pulling out their old, out of the rabbit out of the hat of the old fake IL stint, where it's like, oh yeah, Yamamoto has an oblique injury. He's going to miss 6 weeks. Like, he looks okay. Is he really injured? I don't know. So yeah, but you'll figure it out in season if that happens. Like, go with the guy who's got great stuff. with like Yamamoto, and then if the Dodgers pull some funny business in July and August with resting guys or resting Yamamoto, you can find starters off of waivers in every league at any point of the season. So I'm all in on Yamamoto again. I think I've drafted him in one league. I think I drafted him in Labor. I was happy to do it. I think he's really good. I'm excited for him to, if he can get 150 innings, we're going to see some of the best 150 innings in baseball from him. So yeah, I'm excited for him.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've heard some people look at some of my rosters and tell me that, your pitching's not that strong, but I'm looking and I'm like, I got like Yoshi, I got Bryce Miller, I got like Bailey Ober, all guys I really like, and I'm like, why does my pitching suck? Because I didn't grab like somebody you deem as a top 10 guy. I mean, I have like 3 of my top 20, so many ways to go about pitching. Do not let anybody tell you need one of the top 3, because only 3 teams are going to get them, and they probably won't win your league. So
I will say too, like it's important. I just want to say that you should make sure you always keep the chip on your shoulder, because that's what drives me as well. You're telling me my team isn't good because I have Yamamoto as my number 1 starter? Well, we'll see. We'll see about my team not being good. Let's go.
Yeah, but sometimes you just got to go to the YouTube comments and argue with people about why you're right, Gray. Number 14, Spencer Schwellenbach. Last year, 123 innings, 8-7 record, 3.35 ERA, 104 WHIP, 127 strikeouts, 25.4% K rate, 4.6% walk rate. You have him down for a 13-7 record, 3.26 ERA, 103 WHIP, 183 strikeouts, and 176 innings. Struggled in his first 6 starts to a tune of a 5.68 ERA, 1.29 WHIP. Probably got dropped by a bunch of people. In his next 15 starts, he went 92 innings, 2.5 ERA, 0.96 WHIP, 26.2% K rate, and a 3.9% walk rate. Did have some kind of elbow thing to start the season early, which also may explain why his velocity was down a little early on as well. Gray, you like a brave starting pitcher not named Strider. What's going on here? And then additionally, actually, I'll ask the last part next. You go and talk about Schwellenbach, because obviously you like him. You have him well above ADP, and I keep seeing him go well above ADP, and I don't understand it. So I need you to talk about him.
What? You don't like him? Wow.
I like him. I don't understand why he's going where he's going, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really about the K minus walks. Really, like he's got insane stuff, and he doesn't walk anyone. I honestly don't have much like insight beyond that. He looks fantastic. Like you mentioned, like a guy doesn't throw 92 innings in the major leagues and without having a 2.54 ERA and a 0.96 WHIP, 26.2% K rate. I mean, you mentioned the numbers. Like if a guy can do that his rookie year, and he can obviously build on it. If he does that for 150 innings, that's a top 10 starter. It's great. I don't have a ton more than to say he was great last year, and I expect him to keep being great. Like there's he looks to me like if you take his name away and you just look at his numbers, it looks like a top 15 starter to me. So yeah, I'm in. I don't know.
All right, fair enough. I don't really see it. I don't know. I guess maybe part of it is I don't know what he is. Like he's low walks, that's pretty clear. But like I don't really know what he is other than that. Like the K rate is okay, it's fine. But his monthly K rate was anywhere from 17% to 35%. His WHIP was anywhere from 0.77 to 1.31. The ground ball was 27.9 to 53.6. Fly ball was 29 to 48.5. Like I just don't know what he is, and I don't see the upside to have him as a top 15 guy, because again, the Ks I don't think are special. The ERA is fine. The whip should be good. Like the whip should be borderline elite with the walks. But again, that was varied so much for him from month to month. Like I don't really know what he is, and it feels like he's being drafted well above where I have him for somebody that I can't really grasp what his primary like benefits gonna be other than whip.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Also, it feels like the opposite of what you've told us about every Atlanta pitcher who's come up and put up 120 innings.
That's fair.
Like you're always like, Atlanta pitcher 120 innings, he's going to be terrible next year. Now you're like, well, he did 120 innings and it was good, so it's going to be good, obviously. Like,
if that's the critique, that's fair, because there has been a long history of Brave starters coming up, being great for 1 year, and then disappearing into a cloud of Tukey Toussaint. That's absolutely possible. But that's also anecdotal. So I don't know. I mean, he looks good to me. Yeah. I mean, I hope I'm right. I've drafted him in I think one or two leagues, because he is going more as like a number 2. And I have him as a number 1. So yeah, I mean his ADP has allowed me to draft him in certain leagues as my number 2, which is I'm more than happy to take him as a number 2 because I think he's a number 1.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't,
yeah.
But
I mean, I will say this. I mean, for people who are like, oh, I can just wait for Swellenbach in round 8 or something. It's like, I don't think you should do that. Like I say to draft a starter at like 45 overall. So it's like, go for a guy who is going to get taken. So if like Cole Reagan's ADP is 45, which it is right now, so you take Cole Reagan's, and then when you want another starter in like round 8, take Swellenbach. Like I'm not saying to wait till pick 90 or 95 to take your first starter and have it be Swellenbach. Like just because I have him, ranked as a number 1, if you can get him as a number 2, that's better.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Absolutely. If you can get him as a number 2, that's great. I've seen him going earlier and earlier. That's why I kept mentioning kind of the ADP on him. And actually, I don't really mind going with my first pitch around 85, 90, Gray, if I'm being completely honest. Like,
depends on the league.
Give me those guys, and I'm perfectly fine with it in most leagues.
It depends on the league. I'm more conservative than that. I'll take a starter at like 45, 55.
You do a lot more NFBC than I do, which may directly be part of your draft thought process there. In non-NFBC drafts, I don't see pitchers go as early as they do. So that's part of the reason, I think, as well.
That's true.
Number 15, Roki Sasaki, only 23 years old, which is rare for anybody coming over from Japan. Usually we see them much later. But last year in NPB, he had 111 innings, 10-5 record, 2.35 ERA, 104 whip, 129 strikeouts, which was a 28.7% K rate, had a 7.1% walk rate. Young projected for 12-6 record, 2.92 ERA, 106 whip, 181 strikeouts, and 136 innings. High velocity fastball can reach 100 plus. Splitter is nasty. Occasionally throws the slider. 7 innings this spring. He has 0 earned, 7 Ks, 3 walks. I mean, he's looked really strong so far, Gray. He got a few hits allowed in the second outing, but I mean, he's looked pretty good.
Yeah, yes. Hey, I'm actually surprised that he has not moved up really in ADP, because I thought I was going to be low on him. I'm actually high on him. Like I actually have him ranked above ADP.
I think you're the highest person I've seen on him.
Yeah, I've drafted him in like a bunch of leagues. Like like I just said about like, you could take your second starter with Slowenbach. You can take your second starter with Roki Suzuki. I think Sakiaki, excuse me. Sakiaki? Yeah.
Sasaki.
Sasaki, excuse me. Sasaki is like a number 1 in my book, but he's going as a number 2. So draft him as a number 2. I have seen nothing from him that does it other than maybe durability concerns. But other than that, there's really nothing that's striking me as a guy who is not going to be completely and utterly lights out in MLB. I think there's a really good chance, like to give you a comparison, it's like actually all the Dodger starters are kind of like this, but like him and Blake Snell, I think could be really similar, or him and Tyler Glasnow. Like I think they can all be very similar in throwing, like, maybe you only get 125 innings or 130. But they're going to be nasty, good 130 innings. Like I think there's going to be a bunch of like 5-inning, 12K starts you're going to get from him, and it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm perfectly happy drafting him to my roster. I mean, I think he looks great. He was only great in Japan. That's really all he's ever known, is being great. He's thrown up to 130 innings before, so there's no reason I don't think he can throw 150, 160. Whether the Dodgers let him do that or not, I'm not sure, but I expect all of them to be very good, and I expect him to be very good as well. Moving on to the next tier, number 16, Gray. I'm not mad, Gray. I'm just disappointed. You have Jacob deGrom here. He threw 10 2/3 innings last year, Gray. Let me give you innings by year for the last few years here. 30 1/3, 64 1/3, 92, 68. You have projected for 5-3 record, 2.41 ERA, 0.91 WHIP, 124 strikeouts and 89 innings. Oh yeah, by the way, he's already dealing with a stomach illness that's keeping him from throwing. So, yeah, Gray. Like I said, I'm not mad. I'm just a little disappointed in you.
Why? Because I have him ranked too high?
Yeah, you have him way too high.
Okay. I have him probably 50 picks after ADP. I have him very low versus ADP. I'm completely out on deGrom. This is a new tier, and this is players. This is pitchers now that I'm not drafting. deGrom, I am not drafting. If I happen to have him too high for for some leagues that people are in, and he's on the board, I wouldn't draft him. I would just draft something else. Like, it's like, what else is on the board? What else do you need? You need an outfielder? Take Santander. Take something else. Just don't draft Jacob deGrom. I wouldn't. I can see the path for him to actually be like valuable enough to be like a top 100 player overall on the player rater this year, and it doesn't include like an insane like 150 innings or something. Like I think if he throws 100 innings, there's a path for him to be a top 100 player overall and a top 25-ish starter. Like that's a possibility, but there's the other side of that is like he may not throw 50 innings. Like I wouldn't be shocked to see him throw less than 50 and just be like, lights out for like, 12 starts this year. It's just like, I mean, it's great, but it's like, I don't know. There's also this podcast going long, so I don't want to talk about how ridiculous I think it is that people are talking about his Hall of Fame chances. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, he's great, but you mentioned the innings pitched each year. He hasn't thrown more than 100 innings since 2019. I mean, it's like, come on, man. He's 37 years old now. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Yohan Santana didn't make it past his first ballot. That's what I have to say to that. Number 17, Chris Sale. Again, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. No, it's fine. I mean, you had to throw him in here after what he did last year. I didn't think he would do what he did by any means. So I apologize. I'm sorry for telling everybody to avoid Chris Sale like the plague last year. I won't say that about Jacob deGrom because it's never going to happen. 177 innings last year, 18-3 record, 238, 101, 32.1% K rate, 5.6% walk rate. You him down for a 12-6 record, 303, 106, 152 strikeouts, and 123 innings. Velocity was fine, which is, the major concern when somebody's arm almost falls off 6 times. Threw more sliders than ever, over 40%. That can't be good. I mean, it's really about whether he can stay on the field, Gray. I don't have him ranked here because I don't think he can. But again, I understand why you have to rank him. Like, I understand it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen again.
Yeah. I have him again. I have him in a tier of pitchers who I wouldn't draft. And I believe he's going again. I think he's going in like the top 7 starters overall. I believe actually Rudy's high on him. I think Rudy took him in his labor draft. I want to say in like the second or third. No, probably the third round. But still, the third round and a 15-teamer. Yeah, I mean, he took him in the 40s overall, I think. I have him way after ADP. He's currently, his ADP is 41. I think I have him ranked around 80, 85. I'm not in on Chris Sale for the reasons you mentioned. I just think he just had his last big hurrah. I wouldn't be shocked to see him throw less than 100 innings this year. I would not be drafting Chris Sale.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much expect him to throw under 100 innings. That's why I have him buried in my rank. Oh, I have him buried. I have Jacob deGrom buried. Sale, I'm just not going to own. And yes, Rudy in the War Room absolutely love Chris Sale. I get it. He was great. He's great when he pitches. The War Room does not always factor in arm ligament still in the arm. So that's my concern.
There's no tendon elasticity in the War Room.
It's just like a metal like driver shaft at this point in Chris Sale's arm. Number 18, Corbin Burns. Last year had 194 in the third inning, 15-9 record, 292, 110 whip, 181 strikeouts, which was a 23.1% K rate, 6.1% walk rate. You him down for a 15-8 record, 341, 112, 186 strikeouts, and 195 innings. I think we were both on the Corbin Burns shouldn't be the number 1 pitcher, and I think we were pretty much proven right on that. I will say, though, part of my concern was the velocity drop in 23, and it actually bounced back in 2024. He had a really bad August, which was also accompanied with a 341 BABIP and a 38% left on base, which is just ridiculously bad luck. Sierra and Phipp, though, are both saying he should have been worse.
Yeah, and I'm saying he should have been worse too. So we're one and the same. I'm actually like Corbin Burns is one of those where I'm completely puzzled as how people are drafting him like exuberantly as their number 1 starter. Like it wouldn't be me. Like we talk about like. It's like go with command over strikeouts, which is, I agree. That's good. But when you look at Corbin Burns and it's like his strikeouts keep declining each year, it's like at what point are they going to stop declining? Like, are we going to get to a point where he's like a 7.5 K per 9 and it's like he's barely, he becomes Mike Leake? Like, what are we doing here, man? Corbin Burns, like, I want to see Corbin Burns stop declining before I'm anywhere near drafting him. And the fact that people are drafting him like in the top, 5 starters or something, like he's still like the Corbin Burns of old. Like, I don't get that at all. Like it's shocking to me, but it wouldn't be me drafting him. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like him a little bit more than it sounds like you do, although our rankings might say we're about the same. He's fine. The K's aren't going to be there, but he should give you innings. He's going to give you good ratios in theory. I don't hate Corbin Burns. I'm surprised for how much you sound like you don't like him, that he actually comes in at this spot for you. I figured he would be a little bit lower, but as you
And
mentioned, he's
he's
going a
60. I mean,
lot
he's good.
earlier.
Yeah, he's going as a top 5 starter, and he's going like 60 picks overall before I have him ranked. So, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
he's currently the
that's
sixth starter off the board.
yeah, okay. So, I mean, that's still though. That's like, I mean,
That's crazy.
I have him anchored. I have him dropped far enough, I think.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get him, but I just figured you would have him lower potentially. Number 20, George Kirby, 191 innings last year, 14-11 record, 3.53, 107, 179 strikeouts, which was a 23% K rate and a 3% walk rate. Young project for a 10-8 record, 3.29 ERA, 103 WHIP, 142 strikeouts and 154 innings. Dealing with some shoulder inflammation, he has returned to strengthening activities after a biologics injection, which is a new one on me. He's another pitcher who did struggle in August.
I think that's a hip hop group. He had a hip hop group injected into his arm. That's cool. I loved Biologic's first album was really good.
Really, really clean. Kind of phoned it in on the second one. It happens. Kirby did struggle in August, but did have a 341 BABIP. And I was kind of looking through numbers, Gray, and it feels like a lot of pitchers just had really terrible Julys and August. And so I went looking through it. And every year, pitchers have terrible Julys and August. I might just try and not throw pitchers in July and August if I can. Like front load, back load, to avoid those really hot summer months when the ball's just jumping, because there were some really bad numbers for some really good pitchers in those 2 months.
Yeah, no, it's really like if you can pinpoint who's going to be good in April, because April is a little bit fluky as to who's good, but if you can figure out who's going to be good in April, and then September, for me, September is my favorite month to stream in because you know exactly which teams are good, which teams are bad, which pitchers are good, which pitchers are bad, which ones are on a pitch count. Like you know everything by September. So I really like streaming in September. Anyway, George Kirby is off my list. He's off my draft sheet now because of the shoulder inflammation. Unfortunately, I liked him before that, but I'm not drafting him. We can move on.
Yeah. Went from super safe to injured, so not great. 21, Pablo Lopez, 185 innings last year, 15-10 record, 4.08 ERA, 1.19 WHIP, 198 strikeouts, 25.6% K rate, 5.3% walk rate. You have him down for 13-9 record, 3.77 ERA, 1.17 WHIP, 203 strikeouts, and 188 innings. Another half splits guy. First half, he was a 5.11 ERA. Second half, he was a 2.77 ERA. Again, WHIP was almost identical. Walk rate was the same. K rate was better in the first half. I don't know what's going on with these splits because in theory, when the K rate, walk rate is better and the WHIP's the same, you should have better numbers, but it's not happening for some of these guys, Gray. I don't really understand it. But he feels like a safe bet for innings and Ks. The ratios may not be top, and this may be the first guy we talk about where the ratios are a little bit of a hope rather than like they should be coming.
Right. Yeah. With Pablo Lopez, I feel like there's a large contingency of people who are in on him. I'm not one of them. I'm out on Pablo Lopez as well. I think he could be good. Like his peripherals are saying he should be good, but it's also like he goes back to my thing about like how you only need to draft 6 starters and there's 120 of them to choose from. It's like I see Pablo Lopez could be good. I just don't want to deal with it. Like I don't want to deal with him being bad. I can find, I can just draft Jose Berrios 70 starters later and be like, and have like a guy who could be good or who could be bad. I don't need to draft Pablo Lopez to find a starter who could be good and who could be bad. I don't need that ulcer with my, at this point it's probably like my second starter, but still I'm just not drafting that.
Yeah. I mean, funny enough, we have Pablo as the same, I think, number ranked pitcher. But I actually like him, and you say you're not really in on him. So that's kind of funny to me. Maybe it just depends on where they fall and who gets drafted in that 60 to 90 range, where a bunch of these starters are going. I just like the stuff. Like the stuff on Pablo Lopez is so nasty. I kind of feel like he is due to take that next step, but we'll completely understand that it is based on what I've seen, not what has actually happened on the field so far.
Right.
Next tier, number 22, Bailey Ober, 178 innings, 12-9 record, 3.98 ERA, 1.00 WHIP, 191 strikeouts, which was a 26.9% K rate, 6.1% walk rate. You have him down for a 13-8 record, 3.69 ERA, 1.09 WHIP, 184 strikeouts, and 176 innings. Great. I've said it for a few people. He had a bad August. Few bad starts here and there, but really a good year from Ober. Sierra says that it should have been a little bit better at 3.56. It's the best K rate we've seen from him. 6.1% is the worst walk rate he's shown, but still pretty solid.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a new tier and also a pitcher who I would be drafting. In theory, there seems to be a little bit of helium on Bailey Ober where I haven't been in enough to really been like, I don't know, for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked for my drafts to get him, but I do like him. I do love a guy who's got solid strikeouts and really good command, which he has. I've been in on him I have actually liked him for a few years now. I think I wrote a sleeper post for him. I believe it was last year. It might have even been the year before. Like I've liked him for like the last 2 or 3 years. So I love him. It's just a matter of where he's going in drafts that I haven't loved that as much, but I'm close to ADP on him. So there's a chance in theory I could roster him. It just, for whatever reason, it hasn't happened, but he's good. I have no problem with Bailey Ober. I'm all about him. He's a solid ratio bat with good enough Ks.
Yeah, it's so funny, Greg, because again, we have Bailey Ober, same rank in SP. I end up with him all the time, and you say you don't have any shares. So
that's just the way that's just how drafts go, because it's like
it is.
If I've taken like, say, I don't know, Cole Reagans as my first starter, and then like Roki is there for my second starter, or Swellenbach is there for my second starter, it's like, oh, that's great. I have them above Bailey Ober though, so it's like now I have 2 starters. I'm not going to grab a third starter at where Bailey Ober's going, so it's just like it just hasn't happened.
No, I completely understand, and it just, especially in a snake draft, it depends on which side of the board you're on. This year, it seems to matter quite a bit for some reason.
Right.
Number 23, Logan Webb, 204 innings last year, 13-10 record, 172 strikeouts, 3.47 ERA, 1.23 WHIP, 20.5% K rate, 5.9% walk rate. You have him down for a 13-10 record, 3.48 ERA, 1.12 WHIP, 176 strikeouts in 202 innings. Again, a couple of bad months with bad BABIP luck. Innings ratios, he's not going to be a high K guy. He's really never been that. But he should be safe again for innings and ratios.
Yeah, I think he's actually one of the safer guys who is, I think he's probably getting drafted a little bit lower than he should be going. He throws a ton of ground balls, like a ton, almost 60% ground ball rate. His Ks aren't going to be amazing, like you mentioned, but he has good command. He's really safe. Like if you like last year at this time, I believe Logan Webb was going in like the top 12 to 14 starters off the board. And now he's like going around like the 25th starter. I mean, yeah, it's like split the difference maybe, but still, it's like he has top 15 starter possibility because his command is so good. So the ratios are going to be really good. So if he gets into one of those years where he has like a just over 8K per nine and he happens to win 15 games and his ratios are going to be so good, he could be a top 10 starter. So I like Logan Webb a lot. I don't think I've drafted him necessarily, but that's again just because the way my drafts have gone. But I do like him.
Yeah, I like Logan Webb as well. And we were talking about where we want to throw our innings if we can. Obviously, if July, August comes around, you need to catch up on innings, you got to do it. But like, especially when we're talking about somebody like Logan Webb, and if you wait on pitching like we do, Gray, getting a ratios guy can actually be better than trying to chase down strikeouts, because at the end of the year, you can throw streamers and get those strikeouts. You cannot make up for ratios. So if your ratios are blown up, you're done. Like, there's nothing you could do in September to come back from ratios. You can stockpile starters and throw innings. Like, you can come back in Ks and wins. You are not finding ratios. So I think ratios are drastically underrated sometimes, and that comes from somebody who loves strikeouts. Just sometimes you need some ratios, guys. Number 24, Zach Gallen, 148 innings last year, 14-6 record, 3.65 ERA, 1.26 WHIP, 156 strikeouts, 25.1% K rate, 8.7% walk rate. You have him down for 15-7, 3.59 ERA, 1.16 WHIP, 193 strikeouts, and 170 innings. He had a hamstring issue in June, struggled after returning, which again, July, August. So maybe he struggled from the hamstring, maybe July, August. But was good before that and good at the end of the season. Last year of his contract in Arizona, so could be traded potentially. The only reason I kind of bring that up is he's been much better on the road than he has been at home traditionally. So a potential for some concern, but he's been very consistent. I see him drop in drafts to the point where it feels kind of ridiculous. I think he's like the 40th SP off the board on NFBC right now, which again, he's been so consistent. I understand a little bit injury time and missed a little bit and not his best season, but really feel like people are overweighting 24 versus his track record.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier with what I just said with Logan Webb. It's like Zach Allen was I want to say like a top 15 starter off the board last year. So people are overrating 2024, like you just said. I mean, it's like if he's healthy, which I believe he is as of the recording of this podcast. I mean, it's like George Kirby was one of the safest starters going into drafts this year, and he's now has a shoulder inflammation. So like no starters are really safe. No stars are really safety. No stars are really safe. But if Galen is safe, I mean, if he's healthy, no stars are really healthy or safe. But if Gallen is safe, if Gallen is healthy, he is safe. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. If he's healthy, I like him a lot as my number 2 because he's really like a number 1. Take it, man. Take it to the bank all day.
Yeah, and he's going in the 40s and 50s at starting pitcher in some drafts. So a guy that you could potentially see draft in your league or drop in your league and well worth picking up in that case. Next up, the styling, profiling, limousine ride, jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling and dealing. Brian, woo! Last year was really good. Great, 121 innings, 93 record, 2.89 ERA, 0.90 WHIP, 101 strikeouts, 21.4% K rate, 2.8% walk rate. You have him down for a 10-8 record, 3.33 ERA, 0.97 WHIP, 136 strikeouts, and 154 innings. I do think there is some room for strikeout improvement, which is his biggest drawback here. He got better at the end of the season. Was 20%, under 20% for 3 months, 22.7% in August, and 26.3% in September. So as he kind of settled in, the K rate also came up. He was a high K rate guy in the minors. He's got a nice set of pitches that kind of lean into strikeouts. So I like Brian Wu, and I think some people are maybe shortchanging him on the strikeout potential.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think, his other drawback is probably the innings pitched. How many are you going to get? Last year is 121. Maybe he can do 150. I don't know. Possibly 155, maybe 135. It's hard to say, but I like him. I mean, absolutely. He is, he's a guy I'm drafting as much as I can. Like any guy who has if he can get just a K more per 9 with his insanely low walk rate. Oh, he's going to be so good, man. He's going to be a top 5 starter if he can just get a few more. If he can get a little bit more on the strikeouts, he's going to be so good. So yeah, I'm absolutely in. I love him.
Yeah, me too. Number 26, Sonny Gray, 166 innings last year, 13-9 record, 3.84 ERA, 109 WHIP, 203 strikeouts, 30.3% K rate, 5.8% walk rate. You him down for 12-10, 3.56 ERA, 113 WHIP, 186 strikeouts, and 164 innings. I mean, velocity's been in line with the last couple of years. It's maybe down a little bit here in spring training, which is a slight concern, but it's still very early. Sonny Gray, it feels like he should go higher given the numbers that I just read off, but also he's 35 years old. ERA's been heading in the wrong direction, but still, Sonny Gray, very solid option as a pitcher.
Yeah, no, I always find myself drafting him. I think maybe it's just narcissism.
Yeah, I think also the War Room happens to always love him.
It might be. Yeah, it's either I'm drafting Gray either because of the War Room or because of narcissism. It's one of those. I always find that last year, I mean, he was insanely good for his strikeouts went way up, his walks went down. I mean, he had a really good year for peripherals. And this year, still no one has really drafted him. I find probably pound for pound, year over year, he is one of the most underrated starters every year. No one ever gets crazy about Sonny Gray, but I like him. I mean, he's not a number 1, but you're not drafting him as a number 1. You're drafting him as a number 3, and he's probably closer to a number 2. So I like Sonny Gray a lot.
Yeah, I don't mind taking Sonny Gray either at that price. Next tier, number 27, Tanner Beebe. Last year, 173 innings, 12-8 record, 3.47 ERA, 1.12 WHIP, 187 strikeouts, 26.3% K rate, 6.2% walk rate. You have him down for a 14-7 record, 3.30 ERA, 1.10 WHIP, 191 strikeouts, and 180 innings. He had a bad August grade, but still had a strong second half. Actually, better than his already solid first half. I really like Tanner Beebe.
I actually I think I wrote a sleeper post for Beebe. I thought he was underrated early. I think he's moved up a bit in drafts, but I love him. I think he's probably there's so many starters to draft. I mean, he's probably a number, he's a borderline number 1 that's getting drafted a 2 or 3. It's he's, I mean, if you were to take his name away and put 173 innings, if you were to put his stats on Framber Valdez, people would be like, oh yeah, he's easy number 1. I mean, it's a 9.7 K per 9, a barely 2 walk per 9, 173 innings, a 3.47 ERA. It's the ERA was even a little bit probably unlucky, maybe. It depends on his left on base. He does elevate a lot, so his homer per 9 might be a little iffy, but yeah, I mean, I love Tanner Beebe a lot. I don't think I've drafted him enough. to be honest. I wish I would have taken more shares so far, but yeah, I'm in. Absolutely.
Yeah, I draft him all over the place. I'm gonna have plenty of shares, so hopefully he continues to build on what was already a great season. Next up, number 28, Hunter Brown, 170 innings, 11.9 record, 3.49 ERA, 1.27 WHIP, 179 strikeouts, 25.1% K rate, 8.4% walk rate. You have him down for a 13.9 record, 3.55 ERA, 1.24 WHIP, 184 strikeouts, and 172 innings. I think this is another guy kind of in the Pablo Lopez mold where we haven't necessarily seen it all come together in one kind of fell swoop, but like the talent is there to put it all together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, completely. Yeah, I think he's another one. It's like if any of these guys are like top 10 starters next year, it would not be shocking at all to me. I mean, Hunter Brown, like you look at his numbers and you're like, well, yeah, I mean, 170 innings of 3.49 ERA. If he would have had 15 wins, which isn't that hard to come by when you have 170 innings. Like, I mean, his numbers aren't that far off from a lot of guys, a lot of starters who are going in the top 20 starters. So, yeah, another like incredible, good value, great starter who, if you're in a deeper league and you're able to get him as your like number 3, I mean, props. He's solid. He's a solid number 3. He should probably be going as a 2.
Yeah, I agree. I will say the only thing really negative in Hunter Brown is he hasn't really figured out whip yet. That could come with a little bit of control, which is really kind of the last piece anyways. So if that kind of all clicks in, we could even see the whip get down to a more reasonable manner. That's really the only thing holding him from being higher than this. Number 29, Jack Flaherty. Last year in 162 innings, he went 13-7, 3.17 ERA, 107 WHIP, 194 strikeouts, 29.9% K rate, 5.9% walk rate. You have projected for 12-6 record, 3.02 ERA, 105 WHIP, 161 strikeouts, and 144 innings. It'd been a while since we saw Jack Flaherty kind of really, really healthy. It seemed like he was last year, and the numbers, showed up because he was phenomenal for Detroit and the Dodgers after being pretty bad the year before for St. Louis and Baltimore.
Yeah, no, completely. I think with him, it's like he's back to like what I was saying with Gallen, where it's like if he's healthy, if Flattery's healthy, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any reason why he wouldn't be a number 1 starter, or at least a number 2. I mean, he had 162 innings last year with a 3.17 ERA and almost an 11 K per 9. Like, if he's doing anything close to that and he's going as like a number 3, it's like there's so many starters. There's so many. Like Jack Flaherty at like where he's going in drafts. Let me see. The right now he's going at like 150 overall. Like that's crazy, man. Like that. Like he was so good last year. Like I understand that it's like, he's on the Tigers versus the Dodgers and stuff, but like he was, Tigers have a great stadium. Tariq Skubal is going like as a number 1 overall, so or at least a number 1 starter overall. So it's like the Tigers shouldn't be holding back Jack Flaherty. I guess it's just a matter of whether or not he's healthy, which I can understand that. There's some risk there, but there's risk with everyone. So I love Jack Flaherty as well.
Yeah, I really don't mind him at all. Again, another guy that seems to drop in drafts just with the inconsistency of his career, but I really think it's just health related. I've definitely scooped him up in some drafts where I feel like he really shouldn't be around here anymore, but I guess I'll go ahead and grab him if nobody else wants him. Number 30, Freddie Peralta. Last year in 173 innings, 11.9 record, 3.68 ERA, 1.21 WHIP, 200 strikeouts, 27.6% K rate, 9.4% walk rate. You have him down for a 12-9 record, 3.61 ERA, 1.15 WHIP, 207 strikeouts, 177 innings. this is your strikeout, catch up guy here in this middle area.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like Freddie Peralta always feels good, during the draft, like grabbing him, and then I immediately regret it, like by April 12th. It's like, oh, what did I do? Why did I draft Freddie Peralta? Hopefully he's a little bit less erratic this year. I mean, at the end of the day, at the end of the season, his stats always look fine. Like, like last year, like you mentioned his stats, like last year he wasn't bad. It's just for whatever reason, like he is so like up and down from start to start, where it's like, oh, 3 innings, 7 earned. And then the next start, it's like, well, I think I'm going to bench him because he was really bad last time out. And then he throws a 7 inning shutout with 15 Ks. It's like, it's really hard from like start to start to deal with Freddie Peralta, but overall for the season in the big picture, he's totally like he's fine as like a number, 2 to 3.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to be pristine in regards to the ratios, but again, you are catching up on strikeouts with Freddie Peralta. Number 31, very hot guy in drafts, Jared Jones, 121 innings last year, 6-8 record, 4.14 ERA, 119 whip, 132 strikeouts, 26.2% K rate, 7.7% walk rate. You have him down for a 9-11 record, 3.79 ERA, 115 whip, 172 strikeouts, and 159 innings. Again, this is a guy that we are projecting to be better because the stuff is absolutely nasty, Gray.
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah, I mean, like, because if you look at his numbers, like, I mean, he looks like a number 3, but he is definitely I think he's getting drafted as a number 2. And people are pushing up Jared Jones. Like, I felt like this weekend in my draft, it was like Jared Jones. There was a lot of people vying for him. Whereas like you get a guy like Freddie Peralta, and it's like, okay, sure, whatever. You drafted Freddie Peralta, but at the end of the season, Freddie Peralta is probably going to be a hair safer than Jared Jones, but I get it. I like the upside too. Like I would draft Jared Jones. Don't get me wrong. I just, I feel like you don't want to push him up too much. Like you want to try and be somewhat realistic with what you're expecting from Jared Jones, because like he still is young, and last year was pretty hit or miss. Like he was solid for most of the year, but there was definitely when he was out for a little while with I believe it was oblique. Maybe he was out for a hair in like July, August, and then when he came back, he was like, it was fine. But I like Jared Jones, so don't get me wrong. I'm just saying he's probably a hair riskier than maybe people are expecting.
Yeah, that's very fair. He is not a polished, finished product just yet, but there is just a ton of upside. So yeah, I mean, it just depends kind of what you're looking for in your draft. Is it a shallow league? I mean, in the shallow league, I'd be taking Jared Jones, absolutely, just banking on some upside. It just depends on what your appetite for risk and growth is potentially. Some people like to see it. Some people are fine not seeing it and just waiting and want it just to happen in season. Number 32, Tyler Glasnow. Last year had 134 innings, 9-6 record, 3.49 ERA, 0.95 whip, 168 strikeouts, 32.2% K rate, 6.7% walk rate, 10-4 record, 3.43 ERA, 101 whip, 161 strikeouts, and 129 innings pitched is what you have him projected for. I feel like it just depends on how much you're willing to take 130, 140 good innings from Glasnow, or if you really need that 160 plus, because Glasnow is absolutely phenomenal when he's pitching.
Yeah, no, I think like him and Blake Snell are, very similar, but I think with Glasnow, while I will draft Glasnow, I haven't yet, but I would. my issue with Glasnow more than Snell, and why I'm a little bit lower on Glasnow, even though they're probably pretty much the same. I think Glasnow's already like he feels like he is a start away from missing 6 weeks with something like every start feels like he's 6 weeks away from missing. Every start feels like he's 6 weeks away from missing, action. Where Blake Snell also not reliable for innings, but I mean, he's actually been on the field for 180 innings in a season before. Like Blake Snell's actually, he's had full seasons where Glasnow has never even remotely approached a full season. Now, like we're saying with the Dodgers and the 6-man rotation, they're not really expecting him to do a full season. So maybe that keeps him healthy, but it's also not going to keep him on the field for more than 120 innings ish. It's like that's pretty much what you're getting. What you think he's going to stay on? What you're in?
Well, I mean, if we're just talking about the rotation, it's obviously the top pitcher is going to have more than 120 innings. If you're just narrowing it down to Glasnow, that's fine. Again, like predicting pitcher injuries feels weird. I know Glasnow's literally never done it. But like I don't know why you would have him this far down, whereas you have DeGrom like up in your top 15 or whatever it was, 16. Sorry, like I feel like they're very similar in what they can potentially give you, and I mean at least Glasnow is going to give you 120, 130 innings of it versus 20.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like Glasnow had an elbow issue in September of last year. DeGrom, while coming back from the TJ, I mean, he threw at the end of the year. He's been healthy since the surgery. And it's not like, I mean, we're not talking, we're splitting hairs here. It's like, I mean, we're saying the same things. Glasnow is not like the bill of good health, and neither is DeGrom. I mean, we both know this.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we know that. I just don't understand the giant discrepancy there. It's okay. Number 33, Carlos Rodon, 175 innings last year, 16-9 record, 3.96 ERA, 1.22 WHIP, 195 strikeouts, 26.5% K rate, 7.7% walk rate. You have him down for 13-9 record, 3.86, 119, 202 strikeouts, and 179 innings. Kind of very similar to like a Peralta with maybe better ratios, but what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, no, I that's as well as I think it can be said. He's basically Peralta with maybe some more health issues potentially, but yeah, I mean,
health issues, maybe better ratios, kind of a which one do you want to take on?
Yeah, which one do you want? Like, I actually never really liked Rodon prior to this year. This year, I'm willing to draft Rodon this year. I just feel like he's maybe like I'm willing to draft him, but it's also like it's kind of like, am I drafting him? Like I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but I feel like he's safe enough where as long as you anticipate, like, as long as you're looking at like being realistic about what you can get from him, which is like, a higher ish ERA, like a 3.85 ERA, and like good strikeouts and possibly wins, because in theory the Yankees are supposed to give you wins. So yeah, I mean, he's fine though. I don't mind it. I think he's all things considered, like he's still well within the range of like drafting happily and being like, yeah, I mean, I just got 170 plus innings of a guy who's going to give me a ton of strikeouts and potentially decent ratios. And ratios are fickle anyway, so who knows?
Yeah, no, all that's pretty fair, Gray. I've always been a Carlos Rodon fan. I love the stuff. But yeah, I mean, he has his issues. Next up, number 34. This starts the 24.3% strikeout rate club. Justin Steele, 134 innings, 5-5 record, 307 ERA, 110 whip, 135 strikeouts, 6.7% walk rate, and as I mentioned, 24.3% K rate. You're projected for 11-9, 327, 113, 154 strikeouts, and 151 innings. I mean, we talked about Steele. I absolutely love him. You like him as well, I think, but just a little bit more concerned.
Yeah, no, I mentioned earlier my concern with him with the injury in September, but I do like Steele. For the price, it's definitely it's a little bit contingent on the ADP, but his ADP has been fine. He hasn't been pushed up that high, so I do like Justin Steele though. I'm willing to draft him.
Yeah. Number 35, Brandon Pfaadt. 181 innings last year, 11-10 record, 4.71 ERA, 1.24 whip, 185 strikeouts, 24.3% K rate, 5.5% walk rate. You have him down for a 12-7 record, 3.72 ERA, 1.14 whip, 191 strikeouts, and 187 innings. I mean, he's somebody that we've been waiting to kind of see. He obviously started strong in his career, had to deal with injuries, and then he's kind of come back the last couple seasons with not great results, Gray. But we've seen pitchers kind of build back to being healthy. Jack Flaherty being one that we've just talked about recently, and kind of worked his way back. But I don't really understand the appeal here of Brandon Pfaadt, other than kind of remembering back to better days.
Yeah, I mean, his numbers look. I don't know. I wrote a sleeper post on for Brandon Pfaadt. I mean, his numbers look the same as Justin Steele's. Like you mentioned, the 24% K rate. I mean, Brandon Pfaadt has very little problem with his command. I think he can even up his strikeouts a little bit. Last year he was insanely unlucky. So, I don't know. It looks like a great upside, risky. He's a risky upside bet. I wouldn't necessarily take him as the first or second pitcher off the board, or first or second pitcher on my team. But as a third pitcher, if you want like risky upside, or a fourth starter, depending on where he's going, yeah, I have no problem. I think I drafted him this weekend. He's going at like around 200 overall. That's really good value for a guy who just threw 100, just had 185 strikeouts, and looks like he is just beginning to come into his own, like with his, going into his third year, when pitchers tend to break out. Yeah, I'm in for the breakout. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the predictive stats like him, the FIP, the Sierra both say he was unlucky. I just don't really see it. It feels like it's all projection really with him. I know you said something to the effect of him and Steele have the same numbers. I don't know that I'd think 4.71 1.24 is the same as 3.07 1.10, but if you like him, you like him. I'm definitely down on Brandon Pfaadt. I think I have him like 50s or 60s among pitchers. So you are much higher on him than I am. Next tier here, the last of the 24.3% K rate club, Luis Castillo, 175 innings, 11-12 record, 3.64 ERA, 1.17 whip, 175 strikeouts. You have him down for a 10-10 record, 3.89 ERA, 1.21 whip, 166 strikeouts, and 172 innings. I mean, Luis Castillo has been very serviceable for a long time for fantasy owners. There are some signs that it may be coming to an end, Gray. Do you think it's coming into an end, or just maybe not quite as polished as it once was?
No, I think it's coming to an end. I have this is a new tier of guys who I'm not drafting. I have no interest. It's a struggle for me to be out on a Mariner starter, because I do love the Mariner starters, and it's a great home park, but he has good, solid command, but man, those Ks dropped so badly last year. So I'm pretty out on him. I wouldn't be drafting him anywhere. I think there's probably, I don't know. The end feels like it's either he's going to, completely collapse this year, or it's just going to keep eroding. And if it erodes even a little bit, like his numbers already, like I've talked about Jose Barrios in a top 40 starter podcast a little bit too much. But if his numbers keep eroding, it's like at a certain point he's just like he's Jose Barrios or any of those, like, those guys who give you a lot of innings but nothing really else that's that exciting. Like competent, not terrible, but just not like super exciting. So I'm out on him.
All right, fair enough. I do see that it's not quite the same as what he once was, but I still like Luis Castillo more than it sounds like you do. The velocity has started to bump up in spring training, which is nice to see. I think Brandon Pfaadt would love to get Luis Castillo numbers, and that's my general thought on that one. Number 37, Max Fried, 174 innings, 11-10 record, 3.25 ERA, 1.16 WHIP, 166 strikeouts, 23.2% K rate, 8% walk rate, 13-9 record, 3.49 ERA, 1.11 WHIP, 154 strikeouts, and 158 innings is what you have projected for. As you mentioned, these are guys that you do not like. You've always hated Max Fried. I actually thought you'd have him lower than this. I thought he would be buried somewhere in the depths of the rankings here.
No, I mean, if you take away his name and you look at it just his numbers, they look similar to, like, Castillo. It's like 175 innings at 8-ish K per nine, solid enough like whip, and he's fine if he stays on the field. I'm absolutely out on him because I don't trust him to stay healthy because he's had so many arm issues. So I'm nowhere near Max Fried. I'm not drafting him in any way, but his numbers, if he stays on the field, his numbers look pretty similar to like what you get at this point in the draft. But I'm not in on him.
Yeah, I like Max Fried. I think there's maybe some names that we're still to get to that I like a little bit more. But yeah, no, I like Max Fried. I've always liked him more than you. I think he's just a very solid pitcher and kind of gives you, what you need out of this range of pitcher, which is just solid innings. And I know he has the injury potential, but you could have said that last year, the year before, and it just keeps playing out. So, I'll just kind of keep going with the solid numbers until he stops pitching, really. Number 38 is Hunter Green, 150 innings last year, 9-5 record, 2.75 ERA, 1.02 WHIP, 169 strikeouts, 27.7% K rate, 9.3% walk rate. You have him down for a 6-6 record, 3.72 ERA, 1.14 WHIP, 159 strikeouts, and 137 innings. Hunter Green really took a big step forward. Kind of been waiting for him to take that because the stuff has always been really nice. But it seems like you're in the middle on believing the breakout grade.
I'm out. I'm out on all these guys. I'm out on Hunter Green. He's one of the guys where I'm unfortunately out on because I really do like him, but the elbow issue at end of last year that sidelined him in August. A guy who throws 98 miles per hour on average who has an elbow issue is not someone I want to get involved in. So unfortunately, I like him a lot, and I could see him actually having a great year and me being out on him next year again because I just don't trust someone who throws 98 who has had elbow issues. But I am definitely out on him this year. I'm nowhere near it. Sorry.
We are completely opposite sides of this one because I absolutely love Hunter Green. He came back and pitched at the end of the season. If it was a big deal, the Reds weren't contending. Why would they bring him back and let him pitch if it wasn't okay? Granted, it is the Reds, not the greatest deciders of things, but hey, I still believe that he's perfectly fine. Again, any pitcher can blow out their elbow. I assume if we talk to most pitchers, they'd be like, yeah, I had an elbow twinge at some point last year. I could have sit out a few starts. I love Hunter Green. The stuff is nasty. The strikeouts are nasty. The whip was great last year, despite the walk still stayed high. I absolutely love Hunter Green. I think maybe the ERA goes up some just because of the ballpark, but I have him as a top 20 starter versus you have him here at 38. Number 39, Joe Ryan, 135 innings last year, 7-7 record, 3.60 ERA, 0.99 whip, 147 strikeouts, 27.3% K rate, 4.3% walk rate. You have him projected for 7-4 record, 3.81 ERA, 109 whip, 170 strikeouts, and 121 innings. Joe Ryan, the numbers always say he's supposed to be great gray. We're still kind of waiting for a full season of that great though.
Yeah, he's another one that unfortunately he's similar to Hunter Green, and like I really like Joe Ryan, but I can't draft him. Unfortunately, not this year. Last year he had issues. He had some issues with his shoulder at the end of last year. He was out. I forget how long, but he was out. He was out in August. I'm not into it. It's like I say repeatedly, like there's so many starters to draft. It's like I just don't want to mess with guys who have any red flags going in. So I hope he's fine. I don't begrudge anyone. If you want to draft him, go for it. I do like him. He's similar in Hunter Green to that respect, that I really like them a lot. I don't want to draft them because I am worried about their health. So, unfortunately, I'm out on them.
Yeah, there's another one that I'm just going to disagree with. I love Joe Ryan. I really think the next step is coming, and the offseason imaging said he was completely healed. So I'm in on Joe Ryan. So I'll take him off your hands happily. Number 40, Aaron Nola, 199 innings pitched last year, 14-8 record, 3.57 ERA, 1.2 whip, 197 strikeouts, 24% K rate, 6.1% walk rate. You have him down for a 12-9 record, 3.91 ERA, 1.22 whip, 191 strikeouts, and 196 innings. I mean, at face value, see Aaron Nola down here seems really weird, Gray, but I mean, he was clearly not the same pitcher last year that we had seen in previous seasons.
Yeah, no, unlike Max Fried, Hunter Green, and Joe Ryan, who I like to varying levels, I just worry about their health. Aaron Nola, I don't think he has a health issue. I just don't want to draft him. So, unfortunately for Aaron Nola, he's got a home runs allowed issue. So, I'm just not going near Aaron Nola. He's a thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, I mean, 15.6% home run the fly ball the last 2 seasons has not been great. I mean, really, none of the numbers say he's supposed to be a ton better than what he was, and if anything, he got a little lucky. Velocity is going down, strikeouts are going down, ERA is going down. Spring training velocity was down quite a bit, Gray. He's in the 90 mile per hour range right now on his fastball. So yeah, I'm with you. If he falls to a point where it's ridiculous, and 190 innings of pitching is still valuable, I might take a shot, but more than likely, I think somebody is going to find they want him before either of us get a look at him, and I think we're both perfectly okay with that. Number 41. I didn't know if we were going to get here, and it's certainly longer than I think we wanted to go, Gray, but Shohei Ohtani, the pitcher, for those of you drafting in the Ohtani 2-player leagues. Last year, obviously, he didn't pitch. In 2023, he had 132 innings, 10-5 record, 3.14, 106, 167 strikeouts, 31.5% K rate, 10.5% walk rate. You have him down for 8-4, 2.96 ERA, 108 whip, 134 strikeouts, and 103 innings. 166 innings was the most he threw, and that was in 2022. Certainly don't expect that coming off the injury. And again, with the amount of pitchers that the Dodgers can potentially throw at certain points in the season?
Yeah, he's actually, I had him much higher. I moved him down because the Dodgers seem like they're backing off of like how much he's going to throw and stuff. So I like him. I don't think he's going to be able to throw the amount of innings that's really going to make a huge difference in moving him up. And also, like, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be shocked if like we get to May and the Dodgers are like, oh yeah, he's coming along slowly. And then like, I mean, they don't need him to pitch really. So like if we get to May and they're like, we're looking at like after the All-Star break, like it wouldn't shock me to see him only throw 50 plus innings this year and have him fresh and ready to go for the playoffs. Like they don't really need him. So I started to get cold feet like around like maybe 2 weeks ago when they were already like starting to back off of like Ohtani's innings and stuff and like when he was going to be ready with mound work. I love him. I think his innings that when he's on the mound should be good. I think he could be excellent. I don't know if like it's except for leagues where he's a separate player. I don't even know if it's really going to be like if you're drafting him as one player and you're going to move him in and out of your lineup. There might be starts where he only throws like 3 to 4 innings. And you're going to have him as a hitter, even though he's even starting. Like, I don't even know if you're going to get all his innings, even if you have him as if you have him as a hitter and pitcher, I don't even know if you're going to get all those pitching innings necessarily, or any of them, even in a daily league. Like, obviously in a weekly league, you're always going to start him as a hitter, but in a daily league, you may not even start him as a pitcher in some cases. So we'll see though. I mean, I do think he's going to be good when he's actually on the mound. I just don't know how much he's going to be on the mound.
Yeah, that's perfectly fair. I think when I did my ranking, somebody asked about where Ohtani the pitcher would come in. I think I said somewhere in the like 125 to 140 ADP range. I think maybe you're slightly beyond that without having your overall, just looking at the SPs. But, I think we're both kind of in the same projection range where it just kind of depends on the innings that they're going to be willing to give them. And with the Dodgers, you almost have to project that on the lower side just because of everything they have and of their, what their goal is for the season. They're not just trying to make the playoffs. They have higher aspirations than that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Gray. Took a little longer, but we covered 41 starting pitchers here. If you have questions,
we covered 39 because we skipped Garrett Cole and Paul Skeens.
Gray, you didn't have to bring it up. You could just let us have 41 as a number here. People aren't listening. They don't know. They just hear the numbers I tell them. Anyways, you have specific questions, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Razzball. Gray is at Razzball. YouTube.com/Razzball Fantasy as well. Razzball.com in the comments sections. We're happy to help you there. Until next week, Gray, where we will try and cover twice as many pitchers in less time. I'll talk to you then.
All right, Lades.
All right, see ya.